Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through complex sources to bring you the vital knowledge. Today, we're tackling a part of the brain that, well, doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves.
That's right. We're talking about the cerebellum.
Exactly, the little brain.
Its name does mean little brain, literally. But don't let that fool you. It's tucked away at the back, underneath a large cerebrum.
Right.
But its role is absolutely massive. Think of it as your body's behind-the-scenes coordinator for every single precise, coordinated, timed movement you make. It's constantly editing your motion unconsciously.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much attention the cerebral cortex gets, for conscious thought, but the second you decide to walk or, I don't know, swing a golf club.
Or even just type.
Or type, you're relying completely on the cerebellum's, immense processing power. So our mission today is to really unpack this. We'll look at its structure, the anatomy, lobes, zones, and crucially, how its function maps onto that structure. Plus, we'll cover how things go wrong in the clinical signs using a really helpful mnemonic.
Ah, yes. Danish. It's a great way to remember the key symptoms. It helps translate what can seem like dense neuroanatomy into something, practical and usable for you.
Okay, let's jump into segment 1, location first. If we imagine looking inside the skull, where exactly is this little brain?
Okay, so you'd find it sitting snugly in the posterior cranial fossa. That's the space at the very back and bottom of the skull.
Back and bottom. Got it.
It's directly underneath, inferior to the occipital and temporal lobes of the cerebrum. And there's a really important separator between them.
Oh.
Yeah, a tough sheet of duramater called the tentorium cerebelli. Think of it like a sturdy tent pitched over the cerebellum, keeping it distinct from the big cerebral hemispheres above.
Like a protective roof. Okay, and what about its neighbors, sort of?
Yeah.
Horizontally?
Good question. It lies directly posterior to the pons. That's a key part of the brainstem.
Right, the brainstem connection.
And they're separated by a fluid-filled space, the fourth ventricle. So it's perfectly positioned, really, to talk to both the higher brain centers, like the cerebrum, and the vital lower centers in the brainstem and spinal cord.
Makes sense. Now, structurally, I assume it follows the usual CNS pattern, gray matter, white matter.
It does.
Yeah.
The surface is gray matter, the cerebellar cortex, and it's incredibly folded, really tightly packed fold.
The maximized surface area, presumably.
Exactly. And underneath that cortex lies the white matter, which contains these tracks, these pathways. But embedded within that white matter are 4 crucial clusters of gray matter. These are the deep cerebellar nuclei.
Okay, the nuclei. Our sources really emphasize these. They're the output centers. Right?
That's the absolute key takeaway. The cortex processes information, yes, but all the output signals from the cerebellum funnel through these 4 deep nuclei.
And those are, let me see, the dentate, emboliform, globose, and Fastigi nuclei.
Correct. The dentate, emboliform, globose, and Fastigi. Now, just listing them sounds a bit like, well, just a list.
A bit overwhelming, yeah.
But the magic happens when you connect them to function almost immediately.
How so?
Because, as we'll see, the cerebellum is organized into functional zones, and each zone predominantly uses 1 or 2 of these nuclei to send its processed information out.
Ah, okay. So the nucleus tells you what kind of output it is.
Precisely. For example, the dentate nucleus is huge. It's the main output for the parts involved in planning movements,
Yeah.
the lateral areas. Whereas the Fastigi nucleus, sitting near the midline, mainly handles output related to balance and posture.
Okay, that clicks.
Yeah.
Dentate for planning, Fastigi for balance. Suddenly, those names aren't just abstract terms. They're like specific communication hubs.
Exactly. Hubs defining the type of motor control signal being sent.
Great. That links structure and function nicely right from the start.
Right, so because it's so complex, neuroanatomists have come up with a few different ways to slice it up conceptually. First, you've got the purely anatomical lobes. There's an anterior lobe, a posterior lobe, and this small one tucked underneath called the flocculonodular lobe. They're separated by visible fissures, like grooves.
Anterior, posterior, flocculonodular. Got it.
Then there are the zonal divisions, which describe its structure from the middle outwards. Right in the midline, you have the vermis. It looks a bit like a worm.
Vermis means worm. Right.
It does. And on either side of the vermis is the intermediate zone, and then flanking those are the large lateral hemispheres.
Midline vermis, then intermediate, then lateral hemispheres. Okay.
But the most clinically relevant way, the way that really tells us what it does, is the functional division. This is where we see the purpose behind the structure.
This is the so what part. If we think of it like an orchestra, what are the main sections?
Ah, good analogy. There are 3 main functional divisions: the cerebrocerebellum, the spinocerebellum, and the vestibulocerebellum. You could maybe think of them as, say, The project planner, the quality control inspector, and the balance engineer.
I like that. Project planner, quality inspector, balance engineer. Let's start with the planner, the cerebellum. You said this involves the lateral hemispheres.
Yes, it's the largest division, formed
Yeah.
mainly by those big lateral hemispheres, and its job is really high-level stuff. It's crucial for planning movements, especially complex sequences, and it's absolutely vital for motor learning.
Motor learning, like
It-
learning to ride a bike or play an instrument.
Exactly that kind of thing.
Right.
It's also heavily involved in coordinating muscle activation for smooth execution and plays a big role in visually guided movements.
Visually guided, how does that work?
It integrates what you see with your intended action. So imagine reaching out to catch a ball. The cerebellum helps calculate the trajectory and timing needed based on the visual information before you even really start moving precisely. It gets input from the cerebral cortex via the pontine nuclei
Okay.
and sends this refined plan out, primarily through that big dentate nucleus we mentioned, heading up towards the thalamus and red nucleus.
Hold on. If the cerebral cortex is already doing the thinking and planning, why does the cerebellum need to get involved in planning too?
Because the cortex provides the general idea, the what. The cerebellum adds the crucial how, the fine-tuning, the precise timing, the coordination of all the different muscles needed before the command goes out. It predicts and prepares. It's about adding that layer of skill and smoothness.
Got it. It refines the plan for optimal execution. Okay, second player. The quality control inspector, the spinocerebellum, that involves the vermis and intermediate zones.
Correct. The vermis midline and the intermediate zones beside it make up the spinocerebellum. Its main role is real-time error correction during movement.
Error correction. So it's monitoring things as they happen.
Constantly. It receives a massive amount of proprioceptive information.
Proprioception, that's the body's sense of itself in space, right? Like knowing where your arm is without looking.
Exactly. Muscle tension, joint angles, limb position, all that unconscious sensory feedback floods into the spinocerebellum.
And why does it need that in real time?
Because that's how it detects mistakes. Imagine you're walking and you unexpectedly step on an uneven surface. Your body starts to tilt. You don't consciously think, oh, I must adjust my posture.
Right, it just happens.
That's the spinocerebellum. It gets the proprioceptive signal that things are deviating from the intended plan, walking smoothly, compares it to the motor command, detects the error, and instantly sends out corrective signals to your leg and trunk muscles to keep you upright. It regulates body movements on the fly.
So cerebellum plans the perfect golf swing. Spinocerebellum adjusts mid-swing if your grip slips slightly or your stance wavers.
Precisely. A beautiful interplay. And finally, our third player, the balance engineer, the vestibular cerebellum.
The name gives this one away. Vestibular system connection.
Absolutely. Functionally, it's the same structure as that flocculonodular lobe we mentioned earlier, the oldest part of the cerebellum.
Okay.
And its job is fundamental. It controls balance and coordinates ocular reflexes, especially keeping your eyes fixed on a target even when your head is moving. The vestibulo-ocular reflex, or VOR.
So when you turn your head, your eyes can stay locked onto something.
That's the vestibular cerebellum at work. It gets direct input from the vestibular system, the balance organs in your inner ear, and sends signals right back to the vestibular nuclei to maintain equilibrium and stable vision, essential for just standing and walking around without falling over.
3 distinct but interconnected roles: planner, inspector, balancer. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, we've established this is a high-demand structure. Constant computation, coordination. It must need a really robust blood supply to keep running.
It absolutely does. It's supplied by 3 pairs of artery, meaning one on each side. They all branch off the major arteries running up the back of the neck in the posterior circulation.
3 pairs, what are they called?
We have the superior cerebellar artery, or SCA, then the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, AICA, and finally the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, the PICA.
SCA, AICA, PICA. Got it. And where do they originate? I remember seeing they come from slightly different parent vessels.
That's right, and it's clinically important. The SCA and AICA typically branch off the basilar artery, which runs up the front of the pons.
Basilar artery gives rise to SCA and AICA.
Okay, but the PICA usually branches off the vertebral artery, a bit lower down, before the 2 vertebral arteries even join to form the basilar artery.
So PICA comes from the vertebral artery. Why is that distinction so critical? Seems like just anatomical detail.
Yeah, it matters hugely because of location. Everything is packed incredibly tightly back there in the brainstem and posterior fossa. A blockage, say a stroke affecting the vertebral artery, is very likely to compromise the PICA territory.
Oh, I see.
And because the PICA supplies not only the lower back part of the cerebellum, but also parts of the lower brainstem, specifically the lateral medulla, well, a PICA stroke often causes a very specific cluster of symptoms. It's known as lateral medullary syndrome, or Wallenberg syndrome.
Wallenberg's, right. What kind of symptoms?
You'd see vertigo, difficulty swallowing, hoarseness, maybe some sensory loss on one side of the face and the opposite side of the body, and cerebellar signs like ataxia, because the PICA territory is involved. The vascular anatomy directly predicts the clinical picture.
Wow, okay. So knowing PICA comes from the vertebral artery isn't just trivia, it helps diagnose conditions like Wallenberg's. That makes the artery list suddenly very practical.
It does. And quickly, the drainage, how the blood gets out, is through the superior and inferior cerebellar veins. These drain into the large dural venous sinuses nearby, like the superior petrosal, transverse, and straight sinuses, taking the waste products away.
Efficient in and out. So we know its job. Coordination, precision, timing, learning. What happens when this finely tuned system breaks down? The sources mention common causes like stroke, physical injury, tumors.
And chronic alcohol excess is a big one too, unfortunately. Certain cerebellar cells, particularly Purkinje cells, seem especially vulnerable to alcohol toxicity over time.
Right, and the key thing seems to be that the symptoms depend entirely on which functional part is damaged.
Absolutely. Is it the planner, cerebrocerebellum, the inspector, spinocerebellum, or the balance engineer, vestibulocerebellum? The clinical signs will point you to the affected area.
And for damage primarily affecting those planning and error correction systems, the cerebro and spinocerebellum, there's that mnemonic we mentioned.
Yes, Danish. It's a fantastic shorthand for the main signs of cerebellar dysfunction affecting skilled movement and coordination.
Okay, let's walk through Danish. D is for.
D is for dysdiadochokinesia. It's a mouthful.
Definitely. What does it mean?
It means difficulty performing rapid, alternating movements. Ask someone to quickly slap the back of their hand, then their palm onto their thigh, over and over. Someone with dysdiadochokinesia won't be able to do it smoothly or quickly. The movements become clumsy, irregular, poorly timed.
Okay, so rapid alternating movements break down. A is for.
A is for ataxia. This is probably the most well-known cerebellar sign. It's essentially uncoordinated movement. It can manifest as gait ataxia, a wide-based, unsteady, staggering walk.
Like someone drunk.
Very similar in appearance, yes. Or it can be limb ataxia, where movements of the arms or legs are clumsy and overshoot or undershoot the target. Or truncal ataxia, difficulty maintaining posture while sitting or standing.
So general incoordination. N.
N is for nystagmus. These are involuntary, rapid, jerky eye movements. In cerebellar disease, it's often described as coarse nystagmus, meaning the jerks are quite large, the eyes sort of flick back and forth, especially when looking to the side. It reflects trouble with coordinating eye movements.
Okay, I is a really specific one. Intention tremor.
Yes, this is highly characteristic of cerebellar damage, particularly involving the pathways connecting to the dentate nucleus. This tremor is absent at rest.
Only when moving.
Specifically, it appears and usually gets worse as the person purposefully moves towards a target. So reaching for a cup, trying to touch your nose, the closer they get to the target, the more pronounced the shaking becomes.
That's quite different from, say, Parkinson's tremor, which is often worse at rest, right?
Right. Exactly. The pattern is key. Intention tremor points strongly towards the cerebellum's role in guiding movement towards a goal. The error correction or predictive signals are faulty.
Got it.
S is for scanning speech, sometimes called dysarthria. It's a disturbance in the motor control of speech.
How does it sound?
It tends to be slow, deliberate, with pauses between syllables or words that shouldn't be there. The normal rhythm and melody, the prosody of speech is lost. Words might be broken down like, hello, how are you? Almost robotic. The timing of the speech muscles is off.
Okay. Slow, measured, syllable by syllable speech. And finally, H.
H is for hypotonia. This means decreased muscle tone. The limbs might feel unusually floppy or loose with less resistance when you try to move them passively.
So dysdiadochokinesia, ataxia, nystagmus, intention tremor, scanning speech, hypotonia. That's Danish. And that mostly covers damage to the cerebro and spinocerebellum.
Primarily, yes. Those signs relate mostly to problems with planning, executing, and correcting skilled movements. Now contrast that with damage specifically to the vestibulocerebellum, that flocculonodular lobe.
The balance engineer.
Right. If that area is damaged, the Danish signs might be minimal or absent. Instead, the overwhelming problem will be profound loss of balance. The person might be unable to stand or walk without falling, and their gait, if they can walk, will be extremely unsteady with a very wide stance as they try desperately to stay upright. It looks very much like severe vertigo or intoxication, focusing purely on equilibrium.
That distinction is really clear. The symptoms really do map onto those functional zones we discussed. Planning execution issues lead to Danish. Balance system issues lead to severe instability.
Precisely. It provides a logical framework. Hashtag tag outro.
So, wrapping this up, the big takeaway seems to be that this little brain isn't just one thing. It's a highly specialized, segmented organ.
Exactly. Those three functional divisions we focused on, the cerebrocerebellum, spinocerebellum, and vestibulocerebellum, each handles distinct aspects of motor control, from the high-level planning and learning right down to the fundamental ability to stand upright. And they use different nuclei, like the dentate or fastigiae, to communicate their specific outputs.
And for you, the listener, understanding these specific roles, knowing the Danish mnemonic for those skilled movement problems, and being aware of key clinical links like Picea strokes causing Wallenberg syndrome, well, it gives you a really powerful and practical way to understand a whole class of motor disorders.
It moves beyond just memorizing parts and connects anatomy directly to function and dysfunction.
We really feel like we've distilled some complex neurology into usable knowledge today.
Which leads, perhaps, to a final thought to consider. Looping back to those causes of dysfunction, especially chronic ones like alcohol abuse. We highlighted the cerebellum's critical role in motor learning and its inherent plasticity.
Right.
So, if chronic damage impairs this system significantly, what does that truly mean for recovery, even if the damaging factor, like alcohol, is removed? Does the brain have effective workarounds? Can other areas, maybe slower cortical pathways, fully compensate for the loss of that specialized, rapid, unconscious motor learning and adaptation that the cerebellum excels at? Or is some aspect of that skill acquisition permanently degraded?
A challenging question about the limits of brain plasticity in the face of targeted damage to such a specialized learning center. Definitely something to mull over.
Indeed.
And that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the cerebellum. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.